It's true, we often hear that big companies would like to be more like startup, faster, more flexible, creative. And sometimes we even hear some startup that would like to be more credible, dependable, professional, successful, profitable, like big companies. So it seems like that every company, in some way or the other, want to change their own culture. In the last 16 years, I worked with a lot of different companies that were entering the information age, were trying to adopt new ways of working and adapt their culture to this modern world. So what I'm doing now in the next 20 minutes is to share with you some of the learnings during this journey and give you some reference and some pointers to some techniques and tools that I use during this time. So, what is culture? And I have to start with the very sad story. It's true, it is a very sad story, it's tragic, but it makes the point. It's a story of a group of teenagers, boys and girls, and they were very passionate about creating a better society, making things better for themselves and for people around them. I'm talking about teenagers. They were so passionate that during the summer, instead of going on vacation, they decided to go on a summer camp and talk about politics. Not the politics that we see around nowadays, the noble heart of politics, thinking about a greater good, thinking about leaving things better than you found them, thinking about helping others, starting from those that are most in need. And so they went to this summer camp, and they were not alone, unfortunately. Someone that you would say is a monster followed them with weapons, and there were other weapons waiting in the island. And so you can imagine what happened next. It was a tragedy, the worst tragedy for that country after the Second World War. I really cannot imagine how that was for their parents, sisters and brothers, boyfriend and girlfriends, friends and schoolmates. So what I know instead is how people would react to some tragic event in some countries that I know. In some countries, people would think about hate, revenge, killing that monster, or maybe reinstating the death penalty. But that's what not happened there in that country. That island was Utoya, and that country was Norway. What happened there was very, very different. In some of the places that nowadays are quite familiar, where people leave flowers and messages, a person left this message: if one man can show so much hate, think about how much love we can all show together. And that message became a theme for the whole country. And someone else quoted Pablo Neruda. He took some of our most beautiful roses, but he cannot stop the spring from coming. And then there was a rally. The country came together to mourn those youngsters. And the rally was called, indeed, the Rally of the Roses. And there was a speech. And at that speech, someone said, we, Norway, we will not hate. We will not seek revenge. We will stand together in sorrow, in hope, and in faith. For what those youngsters in Utoya worked for, that is a better society. Our response to Utoya attack will be more openness, more democracy, and more humanity. So, just a second, and let's finish this giving a round of applause to those youngsters, their families, and what they were working for. This story is important for me, but is also a good example of how different countries can act in different ways together. And this is one thing about culture, is that collective narrative that bring a country, a group of people together, is a set of intangible things that contribute to define the identity of a nation or of a group. It is those things that in the end influence how a nation or a group of people behave and decide together. This is what is culture. Now, Hofstadter described the national culture with a set of indexes that he used to describe a national culture and also to compare the culture of different countries. But what we are talking today is company and work culture. It is all those intangibles and those collective narratives that I just described. But it is related to something more specific. Snyder, in his cultural model, is about how we get things done here, how in our company we get things done. That is what company culture is about. And company culture manifests itself in a lot of different ways. For example, the stories that people say in the organization, that employees say when newcomers join the company. The stories that they say at the company event, or those stories that they tell at the coffee machine. The success story and also the epic fail that make the history of their organization. How information is shared inside the organization, how knowledge is created and shared inside and outside of the organization. That's another way how company culture manifests itself. The formal structure of power inside the company, but also the informal network. That's how the company culture manifests itself. And the behavior, the achievement, and the mistake that get rewarded and get punished inside the organization. So we are talking about culture, but why does it matter so much? Why should we talk about these fluffy, intangible things? So when organizations decide to change, to improve, to adopt a different way of working to become most effective, they usually, and we usually talk a lot about these things, tools and processes. We lost an S there. Practices, skills. Those things are tangible. It's very easy to identify them and describe them. Maybe some certification, even skills can become tangible. But then there are other things that are less visible, less tangible, but are extremely important in terms of the success of adapting and transforming your way of working. And those things are the principles, the values, and in the end, the company culture. That's why we are talking about culture, and that's why it is so important, even if it is invisible and sometimes intangible. So what people say when they describe a startup culture or a corporate culture? Think for a second, how would you describe a startup culture? At least one, that say one word. You can
Experimental.
Sorry?
Experimental.
experimental. Okay, I will run fast, I have a little time. Sorry, do you want to add another one? No? Okay. So doing what it takes to get the job done, and it gets scary if you come from a big organization, you are used to follow your role and responsibility. Now you are free as long as you get the job done. Getting the job done over never-ending planning and reporting. Speed over perfection, being experimental, creative, innovative, being disruptive, risk-taking. How would you describe then a corporate culture? What is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Low risk.
Low risk? Slow?
Bureaucracy. Governance.
Governance. Okay. These are few of the things that I heard. The company grows, the number of people that we work with directly and we have a direct relationship is small. So the trust go down. And that's the one thing that happens in large corporate. Making mistake is a normal part of human nature. I don't know how many mistakes I already made during this presentation, but it's a normal part of being human, right? We invented so many things by mistake, so it's fine. But when the trust is low, after every mistake, someone defines a new rule, add a new constraint, define a new policy. And that's how the bureaucracy starts to grow and kill us. Employees sometimes are treated like children. It's not like an adult-to-adult relationship. That may happen too. That's what I've been told. Sometimes the corporation becomes a great corporation. Yeah, it's really great, but that confidence sometimes can become arrogance with the clients. We know better than them, and with the suppliers. They will do what they say to them. The product strategy becomes conservative and risk-adverse. And people in the large organization want more people that are like them. And so the diversity declines. Okay, but how is your company culture then? How it is? How can you say, how can you describe your company culture? During the year, I use a lot of different cultural models to assess company culture. But recently I started to increasingly use two types of models because they are quite simple. Employees that participate to the assessment understand the models very quickly, and then the output that we get can immediately be applied, especially when we are talking about adopting new way of working. So I will describe the two models. The first one is a combination of two models. You probably heard this before, is Lelouch's cultural model. He defined different stages of evolution of the company culture, from the conformist amber to an evolutionary teal. And then Michael Spade extended this model, mapped this cultural model to different degree of alignment to the Agile Manifesto. He was inspired by the integral theory and the spiral dynamic. So in this extension, here you recognize the same color coding. So you have the amber, for example. The first one is traditional driven Agile, where you have an alignment to the Agile processes and tools, but there is no alignment to the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto. Up to the tail adaptive Agile, where you have a full alignment to values and principles of the Agile Manifesto. And so this model gives you a scale that you can use to assess what is currently your company culture. And that's an example of an assessment. What scared me is that those dots are aligned was really scary. Okay, let's go over that. The second model is this one, is about how people live and perceive the processes that are currently in use in the organization. On one extreme, we have extremely bureaucratic and prescriptive processes. On the other extreme, we have ad hoc processes. I call them just do it, Nike type of processes, what you could expect from a brand new startup with the 2-3 people. And then the third vertex is the panic. What is the pendulum panic? Is when there is an emergency or an urgency and the current processes of the company don't fit well to deal with that emergency. So there is a panic and the company swing to the other extreme in order to deal with the emergency. Instead of adapting and evolving their processes in order to embrace the reality that they face over time, they panic and they swing. And so people put a dot vote closer to the vertex that resemble the most their company approach to processes, and put the dot more far away to the vertex that instead are different from their company processes. This is an example of a company where you see that they are on the side of a prescriptive processes, but they panic a lot. Very often they panic and they swing for a while and then they go back to the prescriptive processes. Again, instead of finding the right balance that enable them to handle all the circumstances that they face. So, now that we know what is the company culture, the next step is where we want to go and how do we change the company culture. And I would like to start with the myth, a thing that I often listen, hear from people, and I don't believe it. This is something that I don't believe, that you can change company culture quickly. You set up a program, 1 year, 2 if you are lucky, and the company culture will change. I don't think this is true. Reality is that culture is the byproduct of consistent behavior. What it means consistent, and sorry for the pronunciation. It means years, 5 years, maybe 10 years. That's the time that it takes. So it's a long time, good, nice to hear, then what the hell can we do? Should we wait 10 years like for a whiskey or a good red wine? Maybe we can start to do something now. Wouldn't that be nice? In my journey, I observed the 3 different strategies to start a change in the culture, to start a change in the social norms and in the behavior. And the first strategy is waiting for a crisis. Because when, this is a quote, when a crisis happens, the ideas that are laying around are picked up to start to deal with the crisis. So you plant those ideas up front, that is the strategy, and then you wait. That is a valid strategy. Another strategy that I observed is creating a void where social norms are not defined, where there is no culture. So people have to start to fill their space with their new social norm and the new culture. It's a starting point. Here you see a remake of an old movie, I Rise. It was a science fiction movie in the original one. The first I Rise building, extremely big, the first one like that, high tech, and a completely different space, a city inside the city, where the usual social norm doesn't work because everything is different. The people is different, the technology is different, the spaces are different. And people had to recreate the social norms and the culture. And then we have internet. If you remember, in the beginning there were bulletin boards, news group, mailing list, and someone tried to codify the social norm with what was called an etiquette. Then social networks came and everything started from the beginning, and we will know where we are now. But the strategy is that one, creating the void. So what I noticed two organizations adopting this approach. They create a new team from scratch. Employees have to reapply for a role in the new team, and when the team is created, is moved into a new office inside a new building. And that empty space creates the void, and then leaders and people, by example and by leadership, guide the creation of the new culture, hoping that it goes directing that new culture in the desired direction. The third strategy that I observed is tweaking the environment. Lewis described this equation. He says that is a psychologist and say that the behavior of the people is a function of the people and his or her environment. For a person to change, again, take years if a person wants to change. If I tell you to change, it takes much more years or maybe never. So this equation tells us that it's much easier to tweak the environment. Leaders can create an environment around people that promote the right behavior, the right disposition of people. So those are the three strategies. I quickly share with you and give you some pointer of some other tools that I find useful. This is from Andrea Provaglio. It's a 4-quadrant for all the consultants that we have in the room. So on the top, you can classify the behaviors that you observe, classify between desirable and undesirable. And then on the bottom, instead, the behaviors that you don't see, but you say, I would not like this one, or I would like to see this behavior. And then you can work to reduce, support, prevent, or promote those behaviors. The closer that you are to the center, the more you want to do that now. The more far away they are from the center, because you place them, is your prioritization, you will tackle those later. This is a booklet, Creative Climate Change, Keith and Zach. And they describe a creative climate and an uncreative one. So for the bottom part of the previous quadrant, they give you an inspiration of behaviors and things that you may want or may not want. Here you have Joshua Keriosky, and he described what he thinks is psychological safety. Those are also inspiration of what you may want in your organization. And this is a post from Helen Williams, Lean Agile Coach, and this describes when a new behavior starts to turn into an habit. So when the behavior starts to become the normal things of doing stuff. Okay, so through a very sad story, we went describing what culture is and what company culture is. We described the startup and enterprise culture, way to assess company culture, how not to change the company culture, 3 strategies that may work, and few tools and techniques to model a new culture. Now I think we will quickly go to the questions. Those are topics that I'm really passionate about. If you want to talk, if you want the links, you can get in contact with me, or simply if you want to share your experience, because those are topics that I like and I like to talk about. I'm always interested to learn. I think, Lisa, that the next step is the questions, right?
Yeah, we're actually running
very late
over, so we're just going to do 1 or 2 questions now, and then we're going to do a quick changeover, and then all of our speakers will be outside over drinks if you guys want to ask some more questions, if that's okay. So we'll just do 1 or 2 now.
Perfect.
Yeah,
so,
I think there's someone.
Sorry, that part before.
Good catch.
What a great catch. First of all, fascinating talk. I find it very interesting.
Thank you.
Just from your experience, have you got examples of where companies who have shifted their culture successfully? What did they do? How did they do it? And what lessons can we learn from
Well, it take years. So usually I see cultural change that starts, and then with coworkers that remain there, I hear the stories that the cultural change continue. I think the most successful one are supported from the top and have the right people. Another ingredient is that the environment around the company. So when the environment around the company require a cultural change, that makes things simpler. I don't have a magic formula, sorry. Maybe that's not what you wanted to hear, but I prefer to tell the truth.
When you say the environment, do you just mean like crisis? You need like something happening that makes the company want to change?
A crisis, I worked in Formula One. A crisis for me has been when Jean Todt left, Ross Brown left, and then there was a big change in the sporting regulation. So before that crisis, everyone thought it's easy to win. I want to become the boss, because you become the boss and you continue to win. Then things start to become very difficult. And if you are the boss, or if you take up a very challenging job, you need to know what you are doing to win again. That's an example of a crisis, an economical crisis, a disruption of your business model, or someone at the top that leave. Those are all examples.
You said the environment needs to be right for the change in culture. Do you mean?
Oh, the environment,
Yeah.
it can be, with the environment, it can be the physical environment, the offices, it can be how people behave and welcome certain behavior, all the things that make something easier or complicated. Again, what gets rewarded and punished. The practicalities that make it easier to do something instead of something else. The communication that makes something clear to everyone versus making extremely complex and difficult. Giving the possibility for people to talk and create connection, that is something that tweaks the environment. Creating barrier versus attracting certain things, those are all examples of tweaks of the environment. There is the ABIDE model that comes from complexity science, and that describes different techniques to tweak the environment. Joseph Perlin describes also different techniques from complexity science, and he described the HEAT model. And yeah, just ideas. I'm throwing ideas, so you need to. I think we are done. Thank you very much. Thank you.